Matthew 14, 22 through 23. Immediately, he made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead on the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. By this time, the boat, battered by the waves, was far ahead from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning, he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "Is it a ghost?" And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat and the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God."
Amen. Thank you for that reading, Steve, and God bless the reading of the Word today. In the beginning, God created all of this. And in the beginning, it said that the earth was void, that it was formless, that it was dark. Isn't it wonderful that the first thing God says is light? Light be. Because it says the earth was void and dark. I don't like it in the dark. Do you? It's good that God is light in the darkness of our lives. But here in the very beginning, it said that the Spirit of God, before God ever says a word, the Spirit of God hovers over the deep, over the waters. Spirit, whether it's in the Hebrew language from the Old Testament or whether it's in the Greek language from the New Testament, is always translated as breath, as wind. And I wonder, what does it mean that the Spirit of God hovered over the deep and over the waters? I wonder if it was a mighty wind that still reeled from the first breath that God breathed. I wonder if it was an awesome wind that parted the waters, or if it was just, that strange little stillness where the air is almost liquid and it sits right in front of you and you can just feel yourself enveloped in the total atmosphere around you. You know that freshness right after a rain or a terrible storm. I wonder what that Spirit was like as it hovered over the chaotic, voidless, formless deep that enveloped this earth. Whatever it was God. There's so many different commentaries going on in this Matthew chapter. And I'm preached it 2 weeks in a row because I want you to get some more continuity. So I'm going to back up one more time. In the beginning of this 14th chapter of Matthew's Gospel, it starts with people coming to Herod's cabinet, Herod's informants, Herod's CIA, Herod's FBI. This is the government people coming and saying, "Hey, we've got a problem, Herod. Remember when you chopped off John the Baptist's head because he was talking too loud and rousing up people? And now that hasn't helped because there's this Jesus out here, and he is like John the Baptist all resurrected up again. I mean, some are saying that he is one of the prophets come back again, and that's what people think of him, and he is beginning to be a bigger problem for you and for the kingdom than John the Baptist ever was." And so Herod begins to plot against Jesus. The Pharisees begin to plot. This is a turning point in Matthew's Gospel. There is a political commentary happening throughout this 14th chapter. And so there is the banquet of Herod, and then remember, immediately after that scene, there is the feeding of 5,000 people, a banquet, a coming to the table in the kingdom of God, where provisions are blessed by God, where we give up what little we have for the sake of others, and God is glorified. And then immediately after this feeding of the 5,000, after the chaos of all of these people, can you imagine? It says that 5,000 people came and Jesus looked at them and had compassion on them. Remember we talked last week what happens when one person interrupts your schedule? And Jesus has 5,000 plus people, and it says he had compassion, and it said he didn't send them a card and say, I'm aware of your plight. Gee, I feel bad. I'm praying for you. But he went out in among those people, and he went out into that chaos, and he began to heal and to cure people and to touch people. He began to be enveloped by the chaos, which ends in that beautiful scene where God brings order to the chaos, where the Spirit of God that hovers over this entire scene sits people down in an orderly fashion and begins to distribute among them the meager provisions that just seem to be more than enough with leftovers. And then it says Jesus again tries what he was attempting in the first place, to retreat to a quiet place. And there he is on a mountaintop. There's a second commentary happening here in Matthew, because throughout Matthew's gospel, written to the Jewish people, to the Hebrews, Matthew wants to make the point that Moses, who is our great hero, Moses who gave us the law, Moses who sits atop of our chain of worship, right beneath God himself. And now we want you to know that Jesus is in that seat where Moses has been. Jesus is this new Moses to Matthew's gospel. And so like Moses, Jesus is on a mountaintop and he is being enlightened by God, and then he comes down, and like Moses who leads his people through the water, Jesus comes now to have an encounter with the sea. An encounter that includes his disciples. And so there is a political commentary, and there is a commentary on the Old Testament. And last week we talked about how Elisha had been a part of a miracle of feeding numerous people with 4 loaves of bread. And what the author wanted you to know was that the God that was alive and at work in Elisha in that miracle is alive and at work in Jesus in the feeding miracle. But now Jesus is rising above the waves and walking on the water. And there's so many little pieces of the commentary, but I wanted to boil it down to something that we could use that would make sense. And no matter whether the commentary is political or whether it's religious or whether it is about creation, the commentary seems to come down to chaos. That in Matthew's 14th chapter there's much chaos. And Jesus continues by walking through the chaos to rise above it. You see, the deep, the waters, are the waters of chaos. And beneath the chaos, where we face death, where we face our loss of control. Isn't that what chaos is? Doesn't it just mean that I'm not in control, that you're not in control? Doesn't it threaten us because we're not in control? And what happens to us when we try to grab the chaos and manage it and put it into control is we seem to lose even more control until we're ourselves being controlled by the chaos. And so here Jesus comes walking on the depths, on the water, and the same Spirit of God that breathes, that speaks to the chaos of creation, the same Spirit that hovers over those waters is alive in Jesus. It's obvious. He's walking on the water. Well, how'd y'all like that? That's pretty good, wasn't it? I worked on that. You're all sitting there going, that's not really Doug, though. It sounds like you memorized all that. It is. Because you know what Doug's going to say. Jesus came walking on the water and... so what? It's just show. You know what? I heard this story that at the Museum of Natural Science and History in Boston, Massachusetts, there is a long, narrow pool of water, and supposedly the atheists watch that pool 24 hours a day with cameras so that they've invited Jesus to come back and walk on that water. And they're waiting on that. And I got to thinking, because I do that. Y'all pay me to do that. I got to thinking, now work with me. If I really wanted to rule the world, if I really wanted to cause chaos, all I got to do is figure out this one little illusion. And don't tell me it can't be done, because, I mean, what's the guy's name? The Robbie Benson looking guy. David Copperfield. Yeah. Yeah. He made the Statue of Liberty disappear. I mean, somebody, some good illusionist. What about David Blaine or that Chris Angel guy? You know, if I could just figure out how to, all you got to do is take a couple of steps, right? Man, you could be in control of a lot of things. Don't leave people with devious minds like me these open doors, because, but you know, back to my first point. So what? So what Jesus comes walking on water? Well, you know what? It is important, because there are two aspects to Jesus that are very important in my life. One is that Jesus is divine. And the divine Jesus is the one that deserves my worship. And the divine Jesus can walk on water, and I don't need to question it. But in our day, in this day when church is becoming more relevant to a new generation, I need Jesus to show me also his humanness. I need Jesus to be like me, and I need to be able to be like Jesus. Jesus said over and over, you'll do everything I've done. You can do it. You can do greater things than I have. Greater than walking on water? No, I need to know what Jesus wants of me. And then again, at the end of the day, the fact that I can't walk on water doesn't really bother me. Does it bother you? No. I mean, what am I going to be served by if I do walk on water? The fact that I can't recreate one of these miracles does not bother me. But I'll tell you what does bother me. Chaos. The loss of control. The fear that comes with it. The feeling that I've got to do something. That bothers me. I need to manage the chaos in my life. And so I try. And there are days that I do quite well. Those are the days you call me and say, how's it going? And I say, great. There are days that the chaos controls me and manages me. You know that story. You're like me. We need to manage the chaos. So there's Jesus out on top of the water, standing up, rising above the chaos. And like Peter, because you know, Peter, after all, always represents us in every story, doesn't he? Peter is humanity. Among the 12 disciples, Peter is humanness in skin. And Peter says, then Lord, bid that I come to you. And then I'm like, Peter, shut up. I'm staying in the boat. But Peter can't, because you can't and I can't. Our own humanness calls out to Jesus, who's out there in that uncomfortable place for us, and we cry out, Jesus, bid that I might come, please, because I've already come to realize that staying where I am is stagnating. Jesus, bid that I might come. And so Jesus says, come. So there's Jesus today, this morning, out there on the waters of chaos, walking on the water and bidding to you and me, come, come. The problem is that, like Peter, when we get out on the water, we get to looking at all of our circumstances again, and we get to examining our situation again, and we get to trying to control the fear and the pain again. And like Peter, we begin to sink. You know, it's this big phenomenon about cutting. You know, you've probably known a teenager that cut themselves. And for a long time, I think we thought that those people were suicidal, but I think now we're pretty comfortable with the idea that may not be what's going on, but that it's a way to manage pain. It's a way to manage pain when sometimes the pain is an internal pain that's been inflicted upon us by life and by circumstances and by the actions of others. And we find that it is almost impossible to forgive. So we move toward, how can I manage the pain? And we all do it. We all have our own little tricks in which we manage the pain. We use a lot of different tools. Some use knives and razors to cut themselves, but others get wrapped up in the past or the present or the future. But we have our own ways of escaping our immediate situation and our pain because we feel the need to manage the chaos. And there's Jesus saying, come on out here. Come on out here where you are out of control. Wow. I found a way to do this. I found a way to do it, but I'm really trying to clean this up. It's one of the filthiest sermons I've ever come up with, so I'm not going to preach it today. But you have to get to that point where you can say, I'm done. You have to be at that point where you say, I'm done. I'm out of juice. I'm out of energy. I'm out of ideas. I'm tired. I'm so tired that I can't take another step. And then, and you're exhausted. You have to be willing to be hanging on to the edge of the world by one finger. And then, of all things, you have to let go. That's crazy. That's foolishness. Now, here's the problem. We get to this point a lot of times where we say, God, I'm exhausted. God, I'm tired. God, I can't do this my way anymore. I want you to do this for me. And so, God, I give this to you. Wait for it. Wait for it. Wait for it. Woohoo! He fell for it again. Do you see what I'm trying to say? I've counseled with people before who say, I forgave someone for this. But then when you get to talking to them, you find out they really didn't. They like saying it because it's a tool they use for bringing conviction on the person they supposedly forgave. You find people all the time who say, I gave up, I don't have anything else, not another trick in my bag, and you realize the person they're saying it to is a manipulative conversation, and it is indeed their next trick, the fact that they're declaring they have no more tricks. We do it all the time. We try our best to fool others, we try our best to fool God, and we most often try our best to fool ourselves. And the fact is, we ain't done. We're not through fighting. We're not through scrapping. We're not through trying it our way just one more time. If I can just convince God, I don't really want you to do it your way. I want you to do it my way so that I might give up. It's a fun journey, and I'd like for you to come see me and tell me where you are on that journey. But one day, you finally get there where you say, I can't do anything now. And you are at the total loss of control. I got there once. One time in my life. Some of y'all were with me when I got there. And you know what I found there? God. Really God. I mean, what I now thought of as God before, I now see as mirror reflections of God in this world. And there are a lot of them. But when you get to that point where there's nothing else but me and God, and then I finally just let me go, there is God. There's peace. There, the air is like liquid, and it's still in front of you. You just are enveloped in it, and you breathe it into your lungs like honey. It's something to experience. There, you find God. There, you can't do anything but forgive it because you've given up the language to manipulate it. Now, when you say, you don't have to say, I forgive it anymore because you can't do anything else. You see, if you haven't forgiven it yet, you're not out of tricks yet. If you can't forgive it yet, you're not out of juice yet. And you know what I tell people like that? Fight a little harder. Push a little harder because you need to get rid of that last little gasp of energy that you have. Get rid of it because there you will forgive it. It's all you can do. There you look at the one who has wronged you and you say, I just truly can't feel that anymore. All you can do is love. All you can do is hope that everyone can experience the peace that just found you. That's loss of control. That is giving into the chaos. And the funniest thing is, you know, I've been watching, they're teaching infants to swim again. You know what they do with them now? They teach little bitty 1 and 2 month old infants, when you get dropped in the pool, roll over and don't do anything. Isn't that beautiful? Because you know what they do? They float right up to the top with their little nose up to the air. When you finally surrender, you will just kind of rise up above the chaos, and there you are on top of the water with Jesus, who's there right now saying, come on. Come on. Well, I'm going to close like this, because I think it matters. This is a sermon about talking the talk and walking the walk. And Jesus is on the water saying, come on, walk the walk. And we all know we live in a culture where if you can't talk the talk, you better not be walking the walk, right? And we got a lot of people out here who are walking, and we're not sure what talk they're talking. And so Jesus is saying, come out here, walk the walk. And now I'm saying, well, first you got to talk the talk. And here's where the problem lies right now. It's time that we stop talking about Jesus and we start talking like Jesus. People have been witnessing for far too long, and the story is you go out and tell people what Jesus has done for your life, and it's time that you got quiet about that and quit talking about Jesus and start talking like Jesus. Too many people, as we have already discovered, have been saying, Lord, I cannot forgive my enemy. Lord, I cannot show compassion to others. Lord, I cannot welcome the stranger. My fear is consuming me. Jesus, save me with your blood. Save me with your blood. And we're talking about Jesus, but we're not talking like Jesus. And Jesus is going around saying, you need to forgive people 70 times 7. You need to welcome the stranger. You need to face your fears and trust God. Don't resist evil. It's time we quit talking about Jesus and start talking like Jesus and see what God does with our lives, with our world, and with our church. And by the way, I have no idea. I've never seen anybody do that before. Well, neither had C.S. Lewis in 1960, and neither had G.K. Chesterton in 1890 when they said, Christianity is a great idea. I think someone should try it. And so I made a phone call and I volunteered, y'all. I'm challenging you in the weeks to come to tell people about your congregation and talk like Jesus, not about Jesus. Because when we do, we'll find that walking the walk is easy. May God bless our walk and our talk. Pray with me.